Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our MatrixStore 4.2 webinar. Thank you everybody for joining us. We're obviously recording just in case we want to play this back at some time and pop it on our Vision instance online. But thank you everyone for joining, and ask questions in the chat if you've got any questions as we're going along. But let's get going, because I know you guys are eager to see MatrixStore 4.2. So one of the key parts of MatrixStore 4.2 is the spaces. Spaces are the logical boundaries we've introduced that makes the cluster a lot more multi-tenancy. Now, the beauty of that means that, I mean, many people with their on-prem probably won't use this too much, but for the cloud instances and for those companies which are large enough to need a multi-tenancy, it certainly breaks up the system a lot more. It gives that accounts, vaults, and admin side of things back to the user almost, where they can control their own space within the cluster, keeping the cluster admin role for an overarching view of everything. Now, every cluster automatically has a default space. You probably didn't realize that default space has been there since 4.0, but it's there and is still usable in all ways. So yeah, if you're multi-tenancy, we can talk about getting you over into the spaces side of things. Of course, spaces does mean you'll start to see a few slight changes in some of the applications. One of the first one is obviously Vision. Vision, you'll have to enable that space login to allow the login to work. But when we actually look at how you log in, there's going to be two different ways. Now, the first way is via a hostname. So if your hostname, your URL, has the space name in the URL, you won't need to add in the space name when you're logging into Vision. However, if you go to a non-host name or a basic one that hits just the IP address, what you'll find is that you'll need to put in the space name. Now, luckily, if you're just working on a demo space name, nothing to do. Just leave that space name blank, and you'll see that shortly, and you'll just come in as always, as normal within the system. And then even better, we'll save a little cookie in the background just so you'll always go back to that same space. So you won't have too much burden adding spaces to things. Similar way for the admin tool. If you log in via a host name, the URL has a host name DNS set up to it. You won't need to do anything. You won't even see that space option. But if you go into the IP address or directly to the node to use the web admin, you will see the option to use an extra space field. Again, default space is standard for everybody, so you might not even see it, notice it, even be bothered that it's there. But it is there in the background if you need to. So our standard applications, the MXFS, the DropSpot, and even buried deep in the Move to and the Interconnect application, you do get to put in the space name when you set up a new instance of it. That means, again, most times you'll leave it blank if you haven't got spaces enabled, but if you are logging in and getting an error thinking, I'm sure I've got the right username and password, just keep an eye out for that little bracketed box next to your user, next to the list, because that'll mean that's the space that it's assigned to in that case. Of course, that does mean you can flip between spaces with the application, but of course you'll need multiple users in those. So Samba and NFS, they don't support spaces at the moment. There's no real way to work with them. If it's a key part of your workflow, we need to have a conversation before enabling anything to do with spaces, because Samba doesn't have a concept of adding in the space login. However, S3 Connect does. I mean, it actually uses access keys, and access keys aren't a part of the space really. So it just logs in with the access key and secret ID. So you won't see any differences with S3 Connect other than under the hood. So what's new in the application? So there's some great new features in MXFS. I know we don't do much to MXFS, but this year we did. Customers have been asking us to work on the view that you get in MXFS. It is used in a lot of places still, but it's particularly for those customers who've got many, many vaults. One of our customers has got a rolling 150 vaults. They just want to see the ones that are mounted at any one time. So that's what we do. And they also want to filter. Well, that's what it can do now. And I'll show you that shortly within the system. One of the other features that came out, you might remember I mentioned it back in September, is the ability to work with hybrid vaults. Now that needs a tiny little bit of explanation because replication always had this feature in place anyway. We write 2 copies of the data to the source matrix store. Once that second copy is confirmed in the destination matrix store, we stub out in the source. That way we make sure we've always got 2 in location. Now what people wanted to do was do that with other storages as well. So our move to S3 application, it was just stubbing a little bit early, so you'd only have 1 copy for a brief amount of time. Well, now it doesn't. With the hybrid vault, you don't need to do that anymore. You'll keep 2 copies in the source matrix store until it confirms the second copy is in your S3 compatible storage. We can also do this to other forms of storage as well. So if you make sure the transfer happens, once you agree that it's successfully in the second storage, you just need to trigger a tiny bit of metadata to the matrix store to say, yeah, let's stub it out. I now confirm the second copy is in my second storage. So that's an API trigger for those who want to do that type of workflow. As you can see on the left, that's how it looks in admin. I'll show you that shortly. But while I've mentioning Move To, we added in some extra features for how we handle those sidecar files. When you're pushing up to S3, S3's got a bit of a limit on the amount of metadata it can accept. And of course, that metadata doesn't go any further than S3. It doesn't go down into the glacier or the deep glacier layer. So what we've got is the option to have it as a separate sidecar file. That can now either be in a separate folder tree, mirroring the original folder tree, or it can be in the same folder as the original object. Just a couple of extra options in Move To. Of course, Vision is the front end a lot of you are very familiar with and use quite a lot, and we've improved that as always. Better search, media management, preview of PDFs, and some new workflows in there as well. So yeah, partial restore, we've enhanced that, made it a bit nicer, can now work on any vault, and you can deliver to any vault as well. Fuzzy search, improved it again, making sure you can return not too many matches, but just the right number of matches. Enhanced proxy support, more work on the HDR content, and that comes from third-party integrations. Improved preview of files, PDFs, text files, etc. In the system, and search across all vaults at the same time. So all the release notes are on our support website, and the feature compatibility list is there as well. I think Laura's going to pop that into the chat window for us shortly so that you can all click on them if you want, or you can all find them yourself as you're going along. But I think everybody wants to see the demo. So let me click over, and hopefully this is working nicely. So here's the example then. This is actually a cluster in the office, and we've got it pointing to a URL which has the space name in it. Therefore, I'm not seeing my space name. What I have got then is another one where I have decided to see the space name, but of course I haven't actually got any spaces set up on this one. I actually do have 2 spaces. So when I log in, I can leave the 1 space empty, and it means the second one, it'll go to that space for the next time. Now to quickly show you, if I log out and log back in, you'll see the space is gone. I've got to choose to enter the space name, but it remembered the last one I chose. So it's not too onerous in that way. Same with Vision. If I go directly to the URL that includes the space name, it's not going to tell me anything about it. But if I go to a URL that doesn't include the space name, in fact, it's just the IP address, now I've got to actually type in the space itself. Again, default one means that it will be empty, which means I don't need to do anything. But when I sign in, it's all perfectly fine. As always, when I sign out, the cookie has remembered the space name. Well, that means I've got something happening in my cookies, and I can quickly nip in there and see that my token is there, space name has been saved. So if I did want to, for some reason, switch spaces, I've just got to kill off the tokens that are in there, do a quick refresh, and my space name should be back. There it is. So let's get into the admin tool and look at these features that we've got going on here. I mentioned spaces. Spaces is where we logically create our space. I've called mine, I've got the default space. I've called one called demo. I could quite easily create another space and that would logically spread things out. As I create that space, it will generate a space admin because suddenly we've got to do a bit more work when it comes to the user side of things. So now, not only have I got cluster admins, I've got the ability to change people between vault, cluster, or space level of various levels. And I can grant somebody access to a space as a space admin as much as anything else. From a vault level, we've got the new system where we see those hybrid vaults. So instead of protection scheme dual, when I flip that to single, I get the extra pop-up, the hybrid vault option. So of course, if I'm doing this with replication, it's going to be doing that for us automatically. Whereas now, if I do it with move to, I can enable this feature, and move to will make sure it's dual copy on the MatrixStore until move to confirms that second copy is on the S3 compatible storage. Or I've got my other storage and I'm going to make the API call that makes that hybrid approach appear. One of the other features, I think I forgot to mention it, was just the audit side of things. Audits will now contain a bit more information. So instead of just having the object ID, we now actually have a file name as well. And that will actually show which folder structure it's in if it's not in the root. Like some of these are. It's going to make it a lot easier for searching your audits effectively. Instead of looking up target IDs and host IDs and object IDs, you can have a bit more meaningful metadata within those showing you your audits. And of course, we can export them, as we all know and do. With Sense, Sense actually increased slightly with a few extra panels this year. The main one is the replication panel. For those of you who got the two MatrixStores and you're replicating between them, being able to see what's outstanding, what's in the queue, what's pending, etc., is very, very useful. This does also do metadata changes as well. So what you could have is, someone's made 1,000 metadata changes, but the actual objects haven't changed, but there's still a massive queue of pending changes. So one of these is actually data, and the other ones can actually show the metadata side of things if you ever see a mismatch between your little totals there within the system. Let's shrink that down for a second and let's have a little play with my old MXFS. Still there, still useful, and still very handy to be able to configure it in the space format. As I said, I can now put in my IP of my node, and now I can also include my space name as well. And as I said, when I do that, it comes up in that format. And now when I go into login, I would be logging into this space if I chose to do that. I'm actually going to flip back to the other one because I remember the password for that one, which is that particular password. And that'll let me log in, see my vaults. I can obviously mount these vaults, but there's that new view option. Show only the mounted vaults, or filter the names, or show all in exactly that format. Probably the first time in a while we've done something to MXFS other than make it compatible with the latest operating systems, but still good to see a bit of work go in there and keeping MXFS relevant to your workflows today. Let's dive into Vision because that's what we're all here to really see, and I'll log into Vision. Let's pick this one today and go straight in with my default space. So as always, we've got the I mentioned the URL and the IP things. We've got the ability to search the vaults in a bit more detail now. So when I search for something, I could just search the one vault, get a few results. I could flick on search all vaults and hit search again, and suddenly I'm searching them all. And I've found out there's 3 in that one, 1 in that one, 4 in that one. So it shows me all the vaults. Obviously, it's going to take a few seconds to get through that. Obviously, the more assets you've got, the longer it's going to take. But if you're really searching for that important thing in the MatrixStore, you'll find it there nice and simply. I've got the ability to search in folders, search extracting metadata, and also the fuzzy search as well. So if I make a mistake, which I quite often do with my spelling, it's still going to return me some results, which is very, very useful. PDFs and files being previewed is again particularly handy. So if I find PDF there, I can see the front cover of it, my thumbnail, but that's not much use to me. I actually want to give it a quick preview, decide if it's the asset I want to see. There it is. it is the one I want. I can even search for text within that PDF and find various things as well, skipping between the pages with that nice little reader that we've got there within the system. Super handy, and something I know Simon Harper's been asking us for a long time. Lastly, but not least, let's talk about subclipping. I'm going to flip over to a different instance I've got here because this one is tuned up for subclipping, whereas the other one is still with the other teams. But I've suddenly got the ability to dive into my videos. Obviously, I've got my player. My player's got JKL support as standard. I can flip between the time codes, etc. But now that's subclipping, instead of just being me saying it's got to be this source vault and this destination vault, I can now decide to use the same folder as the original clip. I might say, you know what, I'm going to put it somewhere else. I'm going to chuck it into this one and possibly even a folder within that one, just so that I know what's going on with it. I can rename it, of course, select my folder and hit create. And that's now going to go off and create my nice little subclip somewhere else. It's a good way of being able to subclip lots of little things into a working folder that you can work with. So I think that's all the main features of 4.2. As I said, there's plenty of little bits and bobs that are in the release notes as well. Some might be relevant to you, probably some won't. But yeah, that's the general overview of where we are with MatrixStore 4.2 at the moment. Are there any questions, any burning questions you have to ask me right now?
Mark, it's Pete, VT.
Hi, Pete.
Hi, Mark. How long's the update, the jump to 4.2?
So the actual jump isn't that bad unless you're planning to use spaces. So if you were jumping, just doing a straight 4.1 to 4.2 without going to spaces, it'd be relatively quick. I think I didn't speak directly for the ops team, but I'm sure they told me it was between half an hour and an hour. If you're planning to do some space migration, though, that then starts ramping things up. So we might be talking a few hours of downtime for that one.
Brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. Of course, you have to step through 4.1. So if you go from 4.0 to, you have to go into 4.1 and then up to 4.2. So depending on what version you're on will obviously depend on the time.
That's cool. Yeah, lovely. Thanks.
No worries. Thanks, Pete. Good question. Obviously, if you did want to upgrade, pop a ticket into the team and they'll try and schedule you in at the earliest possibility for themselves.
Cool. Will do.
No worries. They should actually be approaching you over the coming months as well. I think the initial rollout we've started doing, or we've done a couple of our cloud instances in the UK. We'll be rolling out to the cloud instance in South Africa shortly after, and then of course we'll start picking the customers who've either got a specific feature request in there or a particular need that needs them upgrading, and then we'll be following up with everybody throughout the year to upgrade you as we go along. Good stuff. Okay, well, if there's not too many more questions, feel free to chat to me or email me after or give me a call. That's what I'm here for. But I'll let you get a bit of time back in your day, and hopefully if you've got anyone who wants to watch the video, let us know. It'll be on the demo system in the Vision as soon as possible, and you'll be able to pass it around to other members should they need it. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers, Mark.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Thanks, guys. Mark. Cheers. Sure.